I've been following MarieWieland's work for many years, mostly through the newspapers, and always on my list was, you've got to meet this lady. It's time for us to do a little investigating of North Salem's prehistory. And what precipitated my finally getting together with her was, who else? Robert Treadway brought me this rock, and he said, you found it. He's the one.
I want to know where it's from.
$50, I'll tell you. It wasn't your family.
Because Robert said it looks like balanced rock, and it does. And then I looked at it, and I see all these little heft marks, and I thought, maybe humans did that. So I called Lynn Marie and asked if we could meet, and I took the rock to her, and she said, no, you're wrong. And I'm going to tell you what it really is.
It's a hammerstone, and anyone could see
want it
the
back.
marks. No, it is. In all honesty, it was very funny because I tried to look at some of the marks as she was, but I kept going to places where it had been used to hammer. It's a hammerstone. And the person who picked it up must have known something to have picked it up. And Susie brought up the point about the indentation in the bottom. To make expedient technology, you get a rock and you go like that. And the rock that you're using to break the material underneath will sooner or later develop that. And I think I was amazed that a historian would bring me something that looked so un-artifact-like. Are you with me?
She didn't. It came from Purdy's homestead, but I think it came in as fill later. I don't think it was from our own people. I think it came as fill.
That's too bad.
Yeah, it is.
Because I'd like to do up here what I've done. Remind me not to walk over here again. Please pass this around. Take one. I'm passing out some sheets of paper with the periods I'll be flying through so that you can keep the dates and what was there. And if I can't remember the date, one of you can read your paper and tell me. I believe that technology is developed as it is needed. When a need arises, man will develop the technology to meet that need. Society as we know it today did not just spring into existence. It too was developed to meet a need. There is a continuum of technological and societal advancement. They are not created in a vacuum. Now, having been very pontifical, I want to take you on a journey of 10,000 years, give or take. We are going to talk and look at about the societal and the technological happenings during this period as adjustments to the climate and to the environment. But before I go there, I need to go back 24,000 years. 24,000 years ago, there was a huge cold spell that hit us. And we get glaciers. See the red line on the slide? I think hopefully the slide looks better to you than it does to me. But you can see how far down. That's about the 34th parallel. We get ice and snow, glaciers, down to the 34th parallel by 18,000 years ago. At 18,000 years, it is as cold as it's ever going to get. And at this point, global warming starts and the glaciers begin to recede. The Paleo period, 12,000 to 8,000 years ago, about 10,500 years ago, the glacier pretty much had melted around here. Oh, by the way, in case you don't know, I'm obviously an archaeologist. My main work has been in Richfield, Connecticut. So when I say around here, I really am referring to Richfield, but my guys made a deed with our proprietors on your side of the New York border. So my guys are your guys too, at least at the border. Okay, now, the glacial till, oh, I'm sorry. It left behind Glacial Till and Lake Danbury. You had big glacial lakes. I only make these lectures so I can show you vacation pictures. This one is Alaska. Okay, now the Glacial Till ranged in size from boulders, like your balanced rock, to the cobbles we find in the rock walls, to pebbles, sand, and clay. When the glacial melt slowed down, it began to deposit the clay. When it stops, the sand. When it stops, it deposits the clay. The rivers like the Titigus were wider and deeper than they are today, but they were traveling basically the same beds. The temperatures range from 2 to 60 degrees, much like the past few days. The cool temperature kept the vegetation limited. Right after the glacier receded, there was a tundra environment. Some moss, some lichen, little ferns, little grasses, scrubby. Alrighty, by about 10,005 years ago, it resembled a taiga environment. Now you have grasses, some, not a lot, larger ferns, small bushes, scrub brush, and stands of spruce. This lack of vegetation meant not a lot of animals. We had, however, we know these guys lived around here because there's an adolescent mastodon found at Lake Kitchewan back in 1979. Alrighty. Since the food was limited, the people ranged far and wide, just to find the food and what other resources they needed to live. They live in small family groups. They do not stay in one place any length of time at all because the environment simply will not support them. They are literally wandering from place to place to search for their food. Next slide. That pink thing is not an arrowhead. Don't you dare laugh. It is called a projectile point. This particular one is called a Scott's Bluff point. It is a diagnostic artifact for the late Paleo period. A diagnostic artifact is one that is made at a certain period of time. In this case, it's 10,000 to 9,500 years ago. The point is an excellent example of the wandering of the people. A point of this design was found in Colorado at a bison hunt. It was found in the thigh of one of these paleo bison. There was one found in Scottsbluff, Iowa, actually the first one, hence the name, Scottsbluff Point. One was also found under the rib cage of a mastodon in the northern part of the Valley of Mexico. This pink one was found at Richardson. Hooray for my site. Okay. This particular point, well, before I get to the description of the point, the design gives us a big hint about the wanderings of the people. This design spreads as the people are spreading, and they don't see themselves as being different from whoever else. They have no territories. They are simply wandering. Okay. The point was probably a spear point, but it was also used as a knife. Now, when I tell you that it was used as a knife, I don't mean that it looks like a knife. I mean that I found use wear on it that showed me that it had been used to cut and slice. Now, the drill, which is the little one, don't worry too much about not being able to see these things, because in a minute I'm going to pass it. We also found a drill that has a flute at the center and a fragment of a square knife with a flute. The flute is also a diagnostic sign from the Paleo period that traveled from coast to coast. Again, that mobility. Can I say there are Paleo people at Richardson? Unfortunately, the provenience on these artifacts is really, really bad. One of them was found at a spot that would have been underwater during the Paleo period. However, I've got 3 of them. I have people there, though not big enough group, to leave me many artifacts. They weren't traveling in big enough packs. But these 3 artifacts did not get to Richardson accidentally. They had to have been left there by the people, and considering where they were found, definitely by the people. We know that these family groups are meeting up with other family groups. We're told, the anthropologists tell us, that people do not marry or breed within their own family group. We know the population is growing. Hence, they have to be meeting up with other groups in the territory as they go. There may be a good reason, by the way, that they wandered into Mamanasco Lake. Mamanasco is a kettle pond that is near the Titicaca River, something else we all have in common. Now, in 1979, Roger Muller found a paleo site along the Shiphog River, the first paleo site in Connecticut. And believe it or not, this was not what was so exciting about it. What was so exciting about it is that the carbon, the ashes so that he used to date it, had big enough pieces of wood in it to speciate. And he found that these guys are burning red oak, white cedar, or juniper. Excuse me? These warm climate trees hardly fit the description of what is supposed to be the tundra, flora and fauna that Connecticut, or this part of the Northeast, was. Now, other sites have been discovered along other rivers with exactly the same pattern of flora. So we can deduce from this it must be warmer along the rivers and also the lakes. Hence, it was warmer along the Titicaca and at Mamanasco. And this is one of the reasons I have 10,000 years of habitation at Mamanasco. All right, another question that should occur to you a night later, where does the vegetation come from? First off, the glacial melt would deposit soil along the sides of the river. And this keeps going until you've got enough soil to support trees, stands of trees. Animals, birds and animals, like man, bring the seeds in. More than likely, they're being, there's no more than likely about it, they are being accidentally planted. Man will change his environment to the extent that his tools will allow him to do it. Man is coming in to the scene along the rivers. Obviously, we have the artifacts from him. He is destroying, he's using up or destroying the cold water vegetation. Cold weather vegetation destroyed, the warm stuff is able to move in. Hence, it colonizes, leaving a much nicer eco-niche for man and other animals than was there before. Early Archaea, 10,000 to 8,000 years ago, has a forest environment with spruce and pine. It also has your deciduous nut trees, the oak and so on, and the flora that goes with that, moving now away from the river. It's coming in, or coming out, I guess I should say. Now, there's an increase in flora. Do you want to guess what else is going to be increased? Animals. With the increase of food comes the increase of man. The population is once again beginning to grow. They're still roaming now in the small family groups, but now they are only in their territories. They have become territorial. The territories are probably going to be a pretty good size. Now, do we have them at Richardson Park? They're staying longer and longer at sites. Do we have them at Richardson? We need the next slide. And you're going to get a box with these. These are pieces of bifurcated points. The bifurcated point belongs to the early Archaic period. Now, not only do we have the 3 points now, in this, the 3 paleo artifacts and the little bifurcated points. Now, what we also have at Richardson Park is a floor, not like you walk on. We don't get those floors until the early Archaic. What I mean by an archaeological floor is one where we have evidence of occupation, habitation, and work. Now, it works out really, really well. This is amazing because at one time there were more paleo sites in Connecticut than there were early Archaic sites because you don't have the people. And I had one where we dug down from contact with diagnostic artifacts at every single level till we got to the early Archaic. There is my site being labeled. I have the whole thing right there. And beneath it was a layer with no diagnostic artifacts. More than likely paleo, but I can't say that. But it definitely points to an occupation pre-early Archaic. It's called rain. I'm being sophisticated, right? I can even tell you one of the activities that occupied their time. They were fishing, and I'd like the next slide. And we know that they're fishing during the early Archaic because we find grooved weights and notched weights at other early Archaic sites. Not mine, but others. The next slide shows you what I think the spears look like. Pay attention to the little point. Ingrain it in your memory. I want you to remember it for later. Now, where are they? We know they were eating oysters. Not in this area, but along the Hudson about 10,000 years ago. Shell middens containing oyster shells were beginning to build up. The warm weather starts coming up the river, and the oysters, or down the river, and the oysters start moving up. They must have been fairly large. These babies are 2,000 years old, out of a midden found on an island off the coast of Norwalk, Connecticut. So we know they're fishing, and if we take a look at this next slide, we're going to see one of the things we found. You cannot really see it, that's okay, you get a box. That point, with that point, there's also a thumbnail scraper, called, because it looks about the size of your thumb, and a tiny semi-lunar knife. Those are fishing tools. We find these tools from the early Archaic all the way through woodland. You'll notice the knife, the point is right there. That's the point in Karen's drawing. What you're also missing is, here we go, that's your thumbnail scraper that's up in the picture, and this is your knife. These are the fishing tools that I found there. It works out really nice. Now, Middle Archaic, 8,000 to 6,000 years ago, the weather is warmer. In fact, the weather is about as warm as it is today. The people still live in family groups, but they've now begun to find that they are staying in base camps. From these base camps, they now go out and get stuff and bring them back to the base camp. They are still doing a seasonal round. These base camps will be where most nuts grow in the fall, for example, spring fishing, but they're still, now instead of traveling from resource to resource, they're bringing the resource to the camps. They have a linear type government. Now we here have a vertical government. In Ridgefield, Rudy and the rest of his selectmen, we have the governor and the General Assembly, and above that you will have the president and the legislative bodies in DC. This is vertical. Government goes from bottom to top. These guys, it is strictly linear. The guy with the most political sense is probably going to be the main leader of the group. The guy who does the best hunting will lead the hunting parties. The woman who is best at the bringing stuff in, the harvesting in essence, of the gathering is going to be the one who leads the gathering. They are also still living, I'll get it yet, getting together with other communities in a large sense. The leaders of that larger non-permanent community will be chosen from the families that have gone there to meet up. Because the flora and fauna are abundant, it's easier to slide the bifurcated points, which are from the northeast. You would not see this difference in projectile points unless these groups are seeing themselves as different from the people over there. And we think that these different projectile points are another marker, another identification of the people. You don't think people use identification this way? Look at the way the teenagers dress and look at the way we are dressed. Every group has their own symbols of identity. Now, what we find, this next shot, is going to be the diagnostic artifacts you find in the Northeast. There's a variability there. Some of the little bases are curved, and some are square, and some are long, and then there's that one in the middle that you probably have no clue what's going on with. But these are all the distinctive type. Now, the next one is what we have at Richardson. We have our diagnostic points. These are the ones we have from Richardson. We have all kinds of goodies actually at Richardson. One of the ways that you can tell the population's growing is you get more people. People leave stuff behind. As you can see, we have more points now. The other thing that's really great, they're leaving really great goodies behind. They are leaving behind tools. Now these are not all from the Middle Arcade. I didn't have the patience to separate them out. These are bifacial tools, flaked on both sides. And these are unifacial tools, flaked only on one side, not the side you're looking at. We know that what they are cutting stuff, they're drilling stuff, they're scraping stuff, they're perforating stuff. There's a lot of activity going on. They are working wood, hides, bone, and preparing meals. Wood, hides, bone, that's right, the three things. In the late Archaic period, 6,000 to 3,700 years ago, the late Archaic was a period of increasingly efficient adaptation to the climate. It really does sound a little pompous, doesn't it? The weather was warmer than we have today. The vegetation was mixed hardwoods, oak, beech, hickory, I'm missing one, chestnut, all of those nuts. You had the conifers, the spruce, the hemlock and pine nuts. Then there are the seed grasses, the berry bushes, the reeds. All that vegetation meant abundant animals. Now surely with a broad spectrum of food like that, you would think that there wouldn't be any problem with living. Nothing is ever as simple as it seems. The weather is so warm, there is so much food, the population increases dramatically. It increases so dramatically that it runs out of the food as they know it. They have to now go out and find new sources of food. They have to learn how to prepare the old foods differently. And they start this with, we begin to find new technology. Yeah, I've forgotten your name. I am so bad. It's something like the one you brought
You won't have to
on the bottom. I'm sorry. But this is something like, you know,
Yeah.
these are grinding tools for nuts and seeds. For example, they ground nuts into a flour that they made a paste out of, and they mixed with dried berries and bear fat. If this was a treat for the winter months. The bear fat doesn't do it for me. Okay, the other thing, we're going to take the next picture here. The other thing we begin to find are storage pits. Lots of storage pits. They are not putting stone tools into these storage pits. What they're planting into these are seeds and nuts. Then they're covering it, I would help if I went that way. They are covering it with large flat stones to keep the varmints out. This one was really cool because in the center, and even my picture doesn't show it, there's a slight indentation. They were using it as a grinding stone. Remember I said we had floors in the later archaic? A floor, literally walk on floor. And we have also post moles. Those are these little ones here. So that we have a dwelling there in the later archaic. We had lots of goodies. Another piece of technology that was used at this time was fire. They used fire to make meadows to attract the deer to graze near their habitation, very much like we have in Richfield. An added bonus to the deer meadows were the berry bushes. Berry bushes are good to eat straight from the bush. They are also good to eat when they're dried. And to make it even better, bears and birds love berry bushes. And these berry bushes established themselves between this destroyed land and the forest. The bears and the birds supplied food, decorations for adornment, blankets, and tools. This is an example of man changing his environment to benefit his needs. We know that there was a population explosion. There are more sites found during the late Archaic, and they're larger. There are more people living, I estimate, in the area of 100 at Richardson at any one time. The sites contain more artifacts, more signs of habitation. For example, at Richardson, 75% of our artifacts were from the late Archaic, which was a tremendous amount. The diagnostic points would help if I put them in order. The diagnostic points, the first couple are early or middle Archaic. All the rest are late Archaic. You will notice specifically some of them are, and my mentor and advisor said that crappy is a perfectly acceptable Archaic term, and they're poorly made, and they're made out of material that is, you gotta be joking that anyone would ever do that. The points in the late Archaic really are a mess. We have more work areas, a lot more work areas. They're doing the same basic stuff. But one of the things we're going to find is they are doing it with what would be called utilized flakes. You have a core, you take the flake off, and you use it and you toss it. Unlike the formal tools, which are pretty, that I've been passing around. Do you want to trade?
Yeah, I like this better anyway.
It's more to look at.
Yeah, it's more valuable too.
No, not than the one that you just gave back.
I know.
I was going to say that they're really worth more. Okay, so we've got a lot of good stuff. Now another development is trade. In the Middle Archaic, we know they're trading, but by the Late Archaic, we can really begin to start tracing trade routes. For example, Onondaga and Coxsackie chert is not found in the bedrock. Okay, glacial till. Are we going to get chert in glacial till? The only ones ever found were about this big, and that is totally useless for building a tool. And yet, between 1% and 5% of the lithic material on sites in Richardson, I don't mean in Richardson, in Richfield, and at Lake Kitchewan are chert and Onondaga and Coxsackie chert.
What is chert?
Chert is a cryptocrystalline lithic material that they made like quartz, which they also make. It is a stone. You can't keep this because I need it for a minute. It's a stone that will look pretty much like that. No more questions. It distracts me and I never get back to where I'm going. And I could ramble forever, let me tell you. Susie knows. Okay, so all of this, that's all, except on one site. 44% of the lithic material found on the site were Onondaga and Coxsackie chert. And we go, aha. Because when we look at the debitage, it's the stuff that comes from taking cobbles of chert and preparing it to make tools. There are points, and every condition from preform, which frankly sometimes doesn't even look like what it's going to grow up to be, to the finished point. These people have gone somewhere else. They've gotten this stuff, they have brought it back. They are now turning it into a trade item, and they are trading it throughout our area. And this is where we're getting it. It is one of those things that just make me go, hi. Well, you don't understand. That was my original thinking for my thesis, was one part of it, was this trade route. Okay, now our people are still hunters and gatherers. Their base camps are much bigger. They're lived in now for much longer periods of time. Now the hunters go out and spend a couple of days out maybe at the hunting camps, or they spend a couple of days out at the fishing camps, whatever, and then they bring the stuff back to where they're going. Now, who are the people? Where do we get them? First off, I can tell you the same people occupied Richardson Park, and my bet would be Richfield. The same people used the same lithic material from the same sources, the same way, for 10,000 years. They do not vary. I have never found, it may happen, but so far, I have never found a site that looked as if it resulted from an invasion from another people. I haven't even found a site where my technology looks like it could have come from somewhere else. It all is from my people. This might change. I haven't seen every site, but I'm getting there. Alrighty. The other thing, they speak, they're not related to the Algonquins to our east. That is the right direction, right? East. Let's have the next slide and see if we can look at this one. This is a real, if you've ever seen this in the history books, it was one of my favorite pictures. This is a map drawn by Vanderdonk. He's a Dutchman. It's somewhere, I think, around 1640. I could be off that by a couple of years. And what he has done is he has drawn the Dutch area, the area the Dutch have bought. I'll get it. Okay, now, the theory is somewhere between the Connecticut and the Hudson. The language definitely changes. The possibility is between the Housatonic and the Hudson is a real good place for it to change. I think I have my Is that a reminder here? Somewhere in here, which I cannot see, and am not pointing to very well, is the Norwalk River. I definitely know the people between the Norwalk, but these are your each individual group, family group. Now remember, they're much larger now. They have their own territories, their own identities, but they are of the Wappinger community. And at least once a year, they get together for communal hunting, for politics, introduce the kids to one another. And it may be, by the way, more than once a year. It may be twice a year. Now, let's take the next slide to give you an idea about how widespread. All those little red dots, not the red rectangle, that's the center of town. All the little red dots are sites that I know of in Ridgefield, settled from the late Archaic to the woodland periods. In fact, one of them was also an early woodland site. So Richardson Park was not the only place with woodland. There are 7 sites that I know of at Lake Kitchewan. Lake Walkabuck, is it? Lake Walkabuck also has a site. Ward Pound Ridge Reservation has 2 sites that I have looked at and documented for my own interest. And I will tell you there are more. You can literally walk Ward Pound Ridge Reservation and pick the stuff up off the ground.
This one on the river, they did a thing on the Walkabuck River, which was parallel.
What did I say, the lake?
You said lake, I think it's the river.
Somewhere over in that direction. And I know, thanks to Susie, of 2 sites from around here. One is Peach Lake, the other one, was it Croton Falls?
It's from Holt.
I read it, honest. So there we have them. Aren't they cute? These people, we have a lot of them, and they are well settled in our area. Now the transitional Archaic is only 700 years, from 3700 to 3000. And as its name suggests, it's a time of change. What change? The artifacts, by the way, become really, really pretty. All of a sudden, they're starting to use good material, and they're starting to flake them again. Why? There's a really funny story. It also shows you about the silliness of some cultural anthropologists. There is one at the turn of the 20th century up in Alaska, and he notices that the Eskimo tools are beautifully carved, beautifully designed, painted. I mean, they are really gorgeous. And he asks the hunter, why? Why do you do this? I mean, you lose them. You know, there's the whale, you throw your spear, it's gone. And the Eskimos' explanation was, we honor the spirit of the animal gods with beauty. If we made ugly tools, we would not be honoring the spirit, and the spirit might not accept our spear, and we would not get the animal that we tried to get. Pretty tools equals dinner. Another thing you will find at this period that is a change is we're going to take a look at our soapstone bowls. Can we have our shot? These are not too pretty. They're fashioned after baskets. And even though soapstone is a soft stone, do you want to think about carving them? I found this piece at Lake Kitchewan, site at Lake Kitchewan. Do you want to give that back to me?
Yes, I don't want to drop it. There you go.
Okay. And we can now go to the middle woodland. I don't mean the middle woodland, I mean the early woodland. Early woodland goes from 3 to 2,000 years ago, and the temperature drops precipitously. The bottom just falls out. Winter becomes extremely long and extremely cold. The spring thaw doesn't come until very late, and it is coupled with a drought. Summer droughts. Plants, well, right off the bat, hickory trees go into decline. Oak trees start to disappear. Other plants are also disappearing. With no plants or with fewer plants, you're going to get fewer animals. The whole package means less food. So what you have now is a complete, total collapse and starvation among the people. It is so bad that some communities, for example, the Maritime Arcade, totally disappear. They are totally gone, except for Richardson Park. We found a pile of charcoal, and it's shaped like this. Piles of charcoal are not shaped like that, and about that height. Piles of charcoal are shaped like this. I had not a clue what we had found. Next slide. Until one day, Maureen Cole, who was digging with me at Richardson, asked me how they made boats. Now, luckily, Maureen, by the way, has been digging up this particular area, which is probably why she asked the question. Okay, and I start telling her about, big trees, too big for axes, so you burn them down. Then you cut the limbs off, and then you take them, and you put a little tiny trough in with your woodworking tools, and you set fire in there, controlled fire. It burns, and then you put it out, and then you scrape it out with your woodworking tool, and you dump it. I cannot talk without my hands, so I am doing this, and I'm looking at it, and it suddenly dawns on me. Out and dumped. They're building a boat.
I remember that day.
Do you remember that?
We have a boat building.
So, a meter away, this really is a duh thing, people. A meter away, we have these woodworking tools. Sometimes I'm not the sharpest tool on the site. Now, in the early woodland, oh, I forgot to tell you the exciting thing about it was, not all this mess. I dated the charcoal. And the date was early woodland. Yes! I have artifacts from the early woodland. I have a floor in the early woodland. And I have a boat being made in the early woodland. I am very excited. They had clay pots. They are thick. Oh, the points, by the way, transitional and early woodland. The pots are thick and heavy and gawky. They look like baskets. They are too thick, way too thick to put on a fire. If you put them on a fire, they would probably crack. So they are used for storage. Trade increases during this period. This is one of the social processes that keeps these people alive during this very rough time. Women are still gathering plants, but they're doing something just a little bit differently. They go to the area where their edible plants are growing, and they remove from that area plants that don't belong to encourage the other plants to grow. I think we call this weeding. The other thing they're doing is that they are leaving some varieties, some plants, to reseed, so that when they come back to the area, they will have grown again. This is the beginnings of cultivation. More technology that helps them meet the need that they are experiencing with this really tough weather. The middle of woodland, 2,000 to 1,000 years ago, the weather has warmed up. Living is a lot easier, and the slide is going to show us they are making coiled pots. It's the diagram of how it's done. They're really rather prettier, much prettier than the other ones. They're thinner skinned or thinner thickness. They may be used for cooking. They know They now are fishing, preparing hives, smoking meat and fish in greater number. We have more people. Lake Woodland. The climate is now warm. We're back to climate like today. The food is plentiful. And even though you find places in the Susquehanna Valley and central New York where they're practicing agriculture, they haven't done it in our area. Probably because they have plenty to eat. The one thing you can say for all our rivers and lakes is if they have a lot of game and plants for the people. The people are once again, well, before we get to the people, look at the pots. Let's take another look at another set of pots coming up. These are castellated. Notice the little peaks at the top? I never could do that. Anyway, notice the little peaks at the top. This is your castellization. You'll see they have a neck, but they still have the rounded bottoms. Let's go to the next slide. And this is how they're used. They are hung over the fire, or they're placed directly in circles of stone with fire underneath them. The people are once again settling into the larger communities because the population is increasing. They still have a seasonal round, which they follow. They still are gathering once a year for the storytelling, politicking, introducing the kids to the other people. Their leaders are probably chosen the same way. It's a vertical government still. The leaders are probably the ones who give the most of their possessions to the people who need it. The social security system that has helped them survive. Life is stable once more. However, it doesn't last. There's a huge change coming, and that change is something that they will not recover from, and the change is contact. We're not going to do contact today because we don't have time. In the interest, however, of self-promotion, on the 25th of April and the 1st of May, it's a 2-period class, I will be teaching the contact, well, actually the deeds in Ridgefield between the Indian proprietors and the Ridgefield proprietors, and this covers contact. The people involved will be discussed. And that's it, guys. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, I passed everything out, right? Yes. All right.
Your course is going to be for Ridgefield Continuing Ed, right?
Yeah. Did I not?
No, you didn't say where it was. You said-
Hey, look, I made it to the end of the talk. It will be at the end of Maureen, I meet her because she, silly girl, came to one of these. An even sillier girl volunteered to dig with me. Pardon?
How would one of us sign up? Just call continuing ed?
Just call Continuing Ed, Peggy Bruno. I'd love to see you. The first course will be to reality whatsoever. And then we will discuss, I will discuss the deeds, beginning with the Dutch and the English. And to give you a hint, in 1640, what is called a sachem, Ponus, sells in April a spread of land from the Hudson to just about the Connecticut River, up and all the islands on the shore. He sells that to the Dutch. In July of the same year, he sells exactly the same land to some Englishman from Quinnipiac, Connecticut. He is, by the way, according to the way he thinks, not doing anything wrong. And the colonials just didn't have a clue what they were dealing with. But to get that, you have to come to school. So, does anyone have any questions or any comments?
Just one on the pots. They come down to a point.
Yes.
The ancient Romans used to do it so they could stack them up in boats. I don't think they stacked them up in canoes. So why a point?
Why are they the rounded bottoms? Because they were using them. You dig out a little hole to put them in, with rocks to hold them up, with a fire underneath. These things were set. I think if the Europeans hadn't arrived to screw everything up, they might have gotten around to the flat bottom pots. But they're based on the design of the basket. There's no need to change them because it works. The question I thought I would get by now was, what did they cook in before pots?